Now that Mr. Caro mentioned it, Bailey recalled hearing something about some new engine technology or something in the headlines before he left for school. He checked earlier and nothing came through on the update sheets though, so he thought nothing more of it. Typical. 20 minutes into his physics class, they decide to update. Now 10 minutes is all Bailey had to study this stuff before the quiz. Ugh, screw it. I'll bomb it. Screw this class. Screw citizenship. Screw this whole system. I don't need it. It's 22:14, and clearly everyone isn't as enthusiastic about the next generation of fusion engines that the RSI have just announced. In a time where space travel was becoming more and more popular, the boundaries of where we could go were restricted by the limitations of our current fusion engines. The large amount of binding energy created by the nuclear force generated increased heat, preventing us from being able to go any faster. We were restricted to a mere 1/100th of the speed of light. This new engine technology, Poseidon, was a revolutionary fusion engine, capable of propelling spacecrafts to speeds of 18,600 miles per second. In blunt terms, 1/10 of the speed of light, a 9% increase on our previous speeds. This may not sound impressive, but this was in fact 16,740 miles per second faster than we had ever travelled before. Needless to say, an abundance of new and exciting prospects were now within reach. The main features of the Poseidon fusion engine were exemplary for their time. Poseidon's use of augmented hydrogen scrubber technology utilised 3 micro-reactors hardwired into a series of relays and scrubbers to collect fuel more efficiently. The large ram scoops, usually placed on the front of the craft, allowed fueling to be achieved by gathering the free hydrogen from the vast emptiness of space, or from within the upper reaches of enormous gas giant atmospheres. In essence, collecting fuel whilst the ship is in flight. Another particularly ingenious conception of Poseidon was its terrestrial atmospheric applicators, or TAA, which would allow the craft to extract the necessary fuel ingredients from a foreign planet's atmosphere, resulting in the ship's ability to maintain its fuel rate. However, this technology wasn't quite perfected yet. The first generation of Poseidon engines suffered from many recurring parts malfunctioning, resulting in increased cost to replace the affected components. Despite this, humankind continued to push forwards. With the announcement that volunteers were needed to board a ship capable of transporting 5,000 citizens in search of a super-Earth, GJ667cc, the call was answered by over 1 million people. These were whittled down to 5,000 of our best, a mix of skills, trades and disciplines that would all have a part to play in making what was once the dreams of many a very true reality. The idea of making contact with a planet awash with alien life was in those days the plot of a science fiction movie, but the construction of the Artemis, a ship that would be filled with stasis couches, or boots, terraforming equipment and supplies, made all this change. To add to the excitement, it was artificial intelligence that would be at the helm of this journey. A journey that would by no means be quick. It would involve over 200 years of travel, and those on board would be placed into a state of cryostasis in order to reach the end of this virgin adventure. The following excerpts from Chariot to the Stars, the official companion piece to the launch, based on the compiled flight logs, personal journals, and witness accounts of the Artemis and its launch document, the commencement of the voyage that began on 12th of February 2232, read. Timestamp 14 hours, 38 minutes, 13 seconds before launch. On the eve of the Artemis' launch, Captain Lisa Danvers was checking circuit boards underneath the comm station on the bridge for the 3rd time. Arthur Kenlow, engineering, sat on the arm of the captain's chair. He'd given up trying to figure out what she was looking for. Lisa always had an issue with big ships. Sure, she'd flown transports before, but this was different. There were 1,000 things that could go wrong. In turn, could affect millions of functions. It was maddening and she probably screwed herself by even starting down this path.
Are you sure I can't assist you, Captain?
A disembodied voice said, murmuring from dozens of hidden speakers throughout the bridge. It was the AI, helpful as always. No, I'm okay, she said, Kenlo mouthed along the words of what was a clearly familiar exchange. Lisa couldn't see anything wrong, out of place, or suspect in the myriad of circuit boards. She hated pre-flight anxiety. No matter what she did, it always hit her bad, so she made an executive decision. She cut herself off and replaced the panel. Kenlo perked up. You good? Yeah, I think so. Hey, Janus.
Yes, Captain?
Generate another set of contingency actions for the stasis boots.
Do you have any specific parameters?
No. Use your imagination.
That is a concept of which I only have an external understanding.
Outside the box. Something that we haven't thought of.
I will try, Captain.
Timestamp. 4 minutes, 21 seconds before launch. The next morning, the world waited. Volunteer population was waiting on an orbital platform. The engineers felt it would be easier that way, save themselves the trouble of having to build launch seating for 5,000 if they didn't have to, so they had been ferried up there in groups over the past few weeks. Today was the launch of the Artemis itself. Danvers and her core crew would take her up, then dock with the platform to pick up the civilians and any last-minute supplies. News orgs from around the world were gathered, ready to capture the moment in every conceivable format, and put it on anything with a screen. Lisa was already strapped in, the nerves and jitters of the past few days melting away with each passing moment. She stared at the main projection screen, displaying the front view of the ship. Right now, it was just a sealed launch tube. She thought about what lay beyond it, the sky that she loved. It was waiting for her to come back. Danvers glided through her pre-flight checks. She was thorough and professional, but couldn't get through them fast enough. Crew departments checked in. It was green across the board. A final check-in with flight control. They were set. It was time. Klaxons outside the ship began beeping. The massive metal gates of the flight tube unlocked with heavy thuds.
Captain Danvers, shall I assume launch control?
No, I got it.
Are you sure, Captain?
I'm sure. The gates started to move.
But Captain, I have a .002 error quotient to...
Just show me that sky. I'll get us there. Timestamp. 9 days, 5 hours, 12 minutes, 57 seconds into flight. Janus assumed control and circled for a week once the crew and civilians had entered stasis to check for any errors or anomalies. Effectively, a dry run of how the ship would run once it started its push. If there were any problems, flight control could abort and even remotely pilot the Artemis back if need be. Flight control finished a final assessment of the checks. Everything looked good. Justin Cobb, the mission director, looked over the bays of technicians, scientists, and analysts. Everyone good? Everyone nodded. This is our last chance. If anybody's got the slightest hesitation or concern, I don't care how it'll sound or how the people upstairs will flip, you better voice it. Silent. Cobb gave it a few moments, then nodded to establish contact with the Artemis. Good afternoon. How are you, Janus?
I have been running simulations, contingency scenarios. Examples include random power fluctuation, impact with foreign body, contact with new uncategorized gas or element, contact with hostile organism, etc.
Any conclusions?
I think will be satisfactory.
Cobb glanced at the nearest tech, slightly confused by the AI's language. You think?
I imagine we will be fine, Mr. Cobb.
9 days, 5 hours, 34 minutes into flight. The Artemis ignited its thrusters for its scheduled 70 minutes. It travelled further than the orbits of Saturn, further than the moons of Jupiter, finally forcing its way through the edges of our solar system into the great expanse of the universe. We wait, we hope, we pray, we imagine, together in the dream that we will finally discover impossible sights and unimaginable discovery. We place our faith in those that have ventured out to become the first ambassadors of the united Earth. With space starting to become a bustling metropolis of federal, commercial and private ships, in the August of 2262, the Goodman, a Type 4 cargo vessel, along with her crew of 8, was unexpectedly hit by a piece of debris while making a routine supply run to one of Neptune's orbital stations, striking the engine array, causing the ship to veer wildly off course. Drifting for several hours, the crew fought desperately to control the ship and initiate immediate repairs to the badly damaged craft. This is the last transmission of the Goodman, communication between her 8-man crew and an operator at the nearest comm station.
Beginning archive playback.
Copy that. Adjusting course 278.
Y'all got it sorted out?
I think so. Gave us a bit of a scare, but I think we're okay.
How's it looking? We're back on track?
You guys good? I can send a tow.
No, we got engines back up. And nav's online. Huh? What the hell is that? Hey Pete, do you see...
Signal lost.
What happened to the Goodman? It's a mystery that perplexed many in the scientific community. Retracing the crew's last known moments gave no further insight. No wreckage was discovered. No supplies. No sign of life. The Goodman unassumingly vanished. The Goodman is not the only ship to have vanished in the NESO Triangle. At least 2 more ships were lost to mysterious forces, with no known cause over the coming months. It simply wasn't safe to risk any more lives, and so, to keep our crew safe, the first no-fly zone was introduced, and the NESO Triangle remained as such for almost a decade. When Global Nexus announced last year that it was embarking on yet another biopic of famed astro pioneer Nick Croshaw, it seemed prosperous. Everyone and their mother knows his story. From his relentless study of the space anomaly that seemed to swallow ships whole, to finally becoming the first man to discover and successfully navigate through a jump point. We've all been here before, seen it done on vid, in song. I'm sure someone's painted it, but here's the thing. This one's really good. Starting with a script from newcomer Thomas Goss, prods were able to attract A-list talent like Michael Forbes and Lee Mahanigan, and director Ariel Khalil. Text and Viz has a verite feel that doesn't patronise. It adds a vitality and urgency to what had always been the stumbling block for earlier attempts at the same story, the early days. This period of Croshaw's life was effectively trial and error, attempting to understand what caused and how to consistently trigger the anomaly to open is pretty dry stuff, especially boiling down to arguments about astrophysics and folds in time and space. Somehow, the makers tone it down just enough to make it accessible and get you emotionally involved, but without losing the intellectually challenging elements of the discourse. Once the film moves into Croshaw's attempts to cross the fold for the first time, it shifts into a more conventional adventure story. But since it's done in such a wonderful job setting up everything that's at stake, you're ready for something a little more fast-paced. Which brings us to probably the standout piece in the entire vid. Everyone knows the dangers of jump point navigation. It's like piloting through an asteroid field with afterburners on. That's what we're told. Now we can experience what it must feel like, the blinding speeds, the abject terror, but also that rush, that insane high, of skating to the edge and coming out the other side. it makes it all the more insane and incredible that this actually happens. The viz once COGSoldier comes out the other side of the jump point are impeccably done, regressing what we all know as the COGSoldier system into what it probably looked like when he saw it for the first time, with all that wonder that I'm sure he felt. Tech achievements are top notch across the board. William Kurtz's score is both sweeping and intimate. Vid will appear to multi-demo crowd, though young children probably won't like the science speak. Available for Dish and Wave set this week. Standard ULDL cost supply. According to folklore, the Null system, discovered by Antoine Lebec, a nav jumper, was named as such from a simple misunderstanding. After Lebec returned from his scouting missions in 2290, the pilot was asked, "Did you find anything interesting?" To which he simply replied, "Null." For the centuries that followed the discovery of the Null, humanity made 3 separate attempts to terraform the system. Despite the many advances that we had made in our terraforming technology, surveyors to the system would always come back with the same conclusion. It simply could not be done. So what exactly makes up this treacherous space? There are known to be 5 planets that orbit the central Cepheid Null star, an enormous yellow supergiant that swells to between 10 and 15% of its standard size every couple of months. It's this hazardous instability in the architecture of the star that made the notion of human habitation in the Null system such an extremely difficult task. It's not just the system's composition that makes journeying through it a perilous quest. Over the last few years, a far more sinister force appears to be in play. Advocacy warnings have highlighted a concerning rise in abductions in the Null systems, with some fearing these are linked to the existence of a slaver pack. It's fair to say that travelling through the Null system should only be a last resort for traders, explorers and adventurers alike, although that's not to say the Null doesn't have a part to play later in our history.